17 Oil Transportation Line. Author, Wild Wolverine. At about the same time, a similar national policy seminar was also underway at a base in central and western China, the difference being that this retreat seminar was of a lower level and no key personnel were present. Lin Huaisheng sat in the last row and listened for 3 hours with his head up, almost falling asleep. On the podium, a very well-known expert on international affairs is constantly emphasizing that the United States does not want chaos in the Indian Ocean, so he believes that the latest conflict is no fuss, because in the end nothing will happen. Experts have been emphasizing 2 points. First, the idea that India might fight Pakistan is unfounded. Second, China and India have the same counter-terrorism interests and cannot undermine this situation. Unable to say why, Lin Huaisheng was very disgusted by this tone. Since the 1970s, my country's interests have always been reconciled with the interests of the United States to achieve maximum value. Why should we challenge the global strategy of the United States? When I said these words a few years ago, some people disagreed. As a result, the Chinese port invested by our country in Pakistan was attacked by militants twice in 3 days and suffered heavy losses. What a painful lesson. The expert tapped on the table and said, making people feel that he is quite proud of these lessons. Lin Huaisheng scratched his head. He really wanted to throw this old dog with the mineral water bottle in front of him. So, any unreasonable idea that focuses on geopolitics is the most dangerous idea. Everyone sitting here may not know the dependence of my country's oil on the Indian Ocean route, and may not know that it is often attacked by our engineers. The power of the CIA behind the tribal armed forces in Balochistan. Therefore, my opinion on the central government is consistent, and we must not display our ambitions in the direction of the Indian Ocean. In 1962, my country had no problem of oil imports, but the situation is different now. The problem of Pakistan is still throw it to the United States, why not do it? The expert talked about his views frivolously, as if speaking of a very distant place. Excuse me, researcher Gao, what should we do if Pakistan is dismembered and the United States stands on the sidelines? A colonel in the front row asked the expert surnamed Gao rudely. No, absolutely not. I promise. The United States has enough ways to curb India's expansion. The expert suppressed other people's questions with a tyrannical attitude, and did not give the necessary explanation. Lin Huaisheng didn't want to ask questions. Talking about international politics was not his specialty. He suddenly wanted to go to the 4157B project. If the opportunity arises and Pakistan is to be disintegrated, then it will not be a simple territorial dispute. By then, India will be so powerful that it will be unshakable. Therefore, he feels that the expert's opinion is quite biased. The rhetoric of experts continues. I know that many of the people here are soldiers. There is a ridiculous view within the army. The India-Pakistan war is our strategic opportunity. I think I should remind you that this is a very unrealistic idea. Our country imported nearly 30% of oil this year. 100 million tons, the main source is Africa and the Middle East. Russia or Venezuela can only provide 15% of the oil we need every year, that is to say, most of the oil needs to rely on the Indian Ocean route. The fact is in front of us, our country cannot take such a risk. But our country is demonstrating the oil pipeline plan in Gwadar Port, Pakistan. The colonel in the front row continued to fight back reluctantly. He roughly expressed Lin Huaisheng's heart. Laying an oil pipeline across the Kunlun Mountains into the hinterland of China? I'm sure that the length is at least 3 times that of the China-Myanmar oil pipeline, and the investment is more than 10 times. Lin Huaisheng shook his head. He felt that the experts were deliberately exaggerating the figures. And the water depth of Gwadar Port is only 14 meters, which is not enough to dock large oil tankers, so the value of this port is not great. The numbers listed by experts easily sent the colonel in the front row, which made Lin Huaisheng feel uncomfortable, but he also there is nothing new to refute the expert. Whispering begins below. Although this expert is annoying, it is undeniable that this point he adds is indeed an irrefutable fact. It is impossible for the Navy to protect the oil transportation line from the Indian Ocean to the Persian Gulf, which is an unavoidable problem if it is to go to war with India. Prime Minister's residence in New Delhi, basement. It is time for Defense Minister Singh to speak. He was talking about the planned battle plan, and Prime Minister Khan sat on the side, smiling as he listened to his ministers talk about the offensive. The first phase that will start right away will be a prolonged air strike. We will be at maximum consumption of Pakistan's Air Force, which is an air force of only 400 combat aircraft, but if we continue as we are now, we will not go beyond the line of control. If we have limited strikes, it will be difficult to effectively exert our advantages. Excuse me, beyond limited strikes, it means, Foreign Minister Chandra cautiously interjected. We will hit all deep targets. Deep targets. Simply put, all military airfields marked on the map, kill their planes on the ground, and not give their planes a chance to take off, land, or maintain. However, the result of doing so is equivalent to declaring war. We will face stricter international sanctions than after the nuclear test in 1998. Mr. Minister, the sympathy of the international community is still in our country, please pay attention to this fact. Prime Minister Khan suddenly spoke to Singh. Think about it, after September 11th, what did the United States do? Did they show any patience? This is the most normal response to terrorist incidents, and the West will understand it. The Prime Minister continued to say disapprovingly. Mr. Prime Minister, that's the United States, not India. Chandra's tears were about to fall. Aspard sat silently by the side. He was a soldier and now he has no part to speak. Yesterday, I had a phone call with President Petrov and talked with him for an hour. He fully understood our country's counter-terrorism stance. The president told me that the Russian Federation will vote against the Security Council at a critical moment. So in the United Nations, there will be no resolutions and presidential statements against India, the Prime Minister said confidently. But Your Excellency Prime Minister, Russians often betray their friends, especially with informal commitments like this. Chandra went out of his way and began to refute the Prime Minister. I firmly believe that Russia will support us. Russia has no interest in Pakistan. Their interest lies in our arms contracts. If the conflict causes oil prices to rise, they will get more benefits. Khan began to explain his opinion self-righteously. Chandra could not refute such a flawed argument. It was like trying to find the biggest hole in a broken web, which was completely futile. What shall I say next? Singh asked the Prime Minister. Please go on, the Prime Minister said, and now most people can see that all the hard lines were carried out by the Prime Minister himself, and Singh has actually gone from a government civilian with only regiment-level command experience, gradually became the Chief of Staff of the Indian Armed Forces. Large-scale air strikes began at 11 p.m. this evening, and we made a careful plan that our Air Force would take off from western bases to carry out non-stop strikes, so as to neutralize the threat of a few top Pakistani squadrons, and our Air Force was in numbers. The superiority in technology will be fully utilized, and in a few days, Pakistan is bound to move their still operational aircraft to an airfield closer to the Afghan side, so that their Air Force will not be enough. Participants they looked at each other in dismay. Things were developing so fast that Singh already had a clear-cut battle plan, but there was a major problem with Singh's hasty strategy. After all, Pakistan is a country with nuclear forces. He didn't mention how to deal with it. Has it been considered that they will use tactical nuclear weapons to fight back? One official asked. All Pakistani tactical aircraft and missile positions that can carry nuclear bombs are under our constant surveillance, Singh replied slowly but surely. Many people who participated in the meeting shook their heads, obviously not believing such a guarantee.